As a diehard Twisted Metal fan, I've always been curious about one specific game in the series that seemed to stick out more than the rest. How did Twisted Metal Small Brawl come to be? Whose brilliant mind was behind the wacky and creative level design? And what the hell happened to Warthog? These questions have plagued my mind for over 20 years, so I just had to find out more. After an entire week of sifting through long-forgotten Twisted Metal forums that haven't been updated since 2002, I have finally come across an old Reddit post that claims that they have found the only way to gain the true knowledge behind the creation of the mystical Small Brawl. In this forum, they stated that some believe you can summon the man responsible for creating the game just by uttering these 9 simple words. Twisted Metal Small Brawl was actually a good game.
What? Where am I? Who summoned me to the YouTubes?
Is this Dave Goodrich, lead game designer and art director of Twisted Metal Small Brawl?
Yes, that is I.
Well, Dave, I have summoned you here today because I have some questions that I've been told only you are the one with the knowledge capable of answering.
Well, the fact that you were able to find me, that must mean you are well versed in the car combat arts. You may ask your questions.
Hey guys, Nick here once again, and on this special occasion I am joined by the amazing Dave Goodrich, who has had a major hand in creating some of the most popular series of video games from the last 2 decades, including Twisted Metal Small Brawl, Vigilante 8 series, Twisted Metal Black Online, the True Crime series, Ratchet & Clank Size Matters, Jak and Daxter The Last Frontier, and the Where's My Water series, just to name a few. And we seem to have summoned him here for a couple questions. Are you ready?
I am.
Alrighty, so for question number 1, what originally got you into game design?
I've been a gamer since the days of Pong and strip mall arcades. At the same time, I was also getting into tabletop games like TSR games and Dungeons & Dragons, but also the Steve Jackson games, which really exposed me to how game design works. With systems and mechanics, you know, the player has to understand and execute the game without a game system handling it for them. And that's really a good boot camp for learning game design. And being forced to understand the design really fascinated me. You know, being able to craft rules for the player to work with and to overcome and create challenges for them was a really satisfying experience. Fast forward to my college days, I was working out of the Pentagon on some secret stuff there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you can... I was doing presentations and briefings to get funding for certain military projects there. You can blame me for the Humvee. I never knew that was going to turn into a recreational vehicle for public use, but that was a real result of one of my my contracts there. My boss at the time wanted me to go to South Korea on the DMZ line and started prepping me for going to the job, saying, don't pack anything, you can't carry out of there in like 5 minutes. Which scared the bejesus out of me. So a friend of mine, at the same time that this was happening, showed me an article in the back of a magazine looking for game artists. And I believe it was Game Dev Magazine or Game Informer. And I applied to the ad, showed him some of my 3D stuff, and got a job in games. So I moved out from Virginia to California to start my 25-plus year career in games.
Wow, that's honestly amazing, coming from working at the Pentagon to go into game design. Awesome. Well, let's go on to number 2 here.
All right.
Did you still have contact with anyone you previously worked with on Twisted Metal Small Brawl? And if so, do they watch your content currently? And would you ever have them on as a guest speaker?
Unfortunately, I have lost contact with the Small Brawl team, you know, also the Twisted Metal Black Online team. They were one and the same. After I left Utah and moved back to Southern California, I suspect several of them are retired now or moved on to Avalanche Studios after Incognito and Eat, Sleep, Play shut down. I'm fairly sure they don't watch my content since I've only been streaming for less than a month-ish, and my audience is very small. I would love to have them on as a guest and talk to them about the old days of car combat. I'm sure they could give another perspective on my Small Brawl stories from programming or the art perspective. I'm recounting most of this from my memory from 20 years later.
Sure.
So talking with them would be a huge help. Once I'm more established, I would love to track them down and see if they'd be interested in, chatting with me, possibly an interview, talking about the old days, or just shooting the shit in general.
That'd be great. That's awesome. And you heard them, guys. Go in the description right now, give them a subscription on YouTube, and give them a follow on Twitch. And what days of the week are you streaming at the moment on Twitch?
Currently, I'm doing Tuesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays, 2 to 4 Pacific Standard Time.
Awesome. So that's where you can definitely check them out there. And that would be super cool if you could get someone on there from your past working crew to, like you were saying, highlight anything that you may have missed, recalling things that happened over 20 years ago. Because I don't know about you, but I sometimes can't even remember what I had for breakfast in the morning. So
I cannot either.
It's a lot to remember, that's for sure. All right, so moving on to number 3 here. Was there ever like an aha moment for you while you were working on Small Brawl? And if so, what was that?
Yeah, I mean, every game you're going to have aha moments as you're working on stuff and running into hurdles and trying to figure out how to overcome those hurdles. I think I had 2 on Small Brawl. One was Mr. Slam's attack being very difficult for kids to land, even for adults to land, because of the short range and the absolute accuracy you needed to grab cars with. My aha moment on that was I worked on a game called Star Wars Demolition where we had a similar attack where if you missed with the attack, it would do a shockwave instead. So that you wouldn't blow the whole attack, at least you would get some damage, and honestly you could hit 2 or more cars, so you were getting actually more damage output with the shockwave. But it was a good way for letting kids who didn't have a lot of hand-eye coordination to do some damage with Mr. Slam, just in case they missed with the main attack. So we wanted to be a little more generous with the specials then.
Oh, for sure.
The other aha moment was when we went from PS2 to PS1. I wanted levels that were in the dark to kind of highlight glow-in-the-dark toys and reinforce that in the RC cars. But when we went from PS2 that could handle real-time lighting effect where we could have the cars look like they're glowing in the dark, light up the environment as they're driving around, to PS1, we couldn't do any lighting effects at all. So I really wanted it for these levels and I planned it. So my aha moment was I can kind of fake it a little bit. It's not going to look great, but at least I can get those levels that I wanted. So I made a secondary bunch of textures for the RC cars that look like they were glow in the dark. And then my big aha moment with that is like, what is the glow going to be? And I realized we had that dark shadow underneath them. So I turned it a glow in the dark green and fudged having a light source on the actual vehicle itself because PS1 just couldn't handle it.
Wow. Well, honestly, it's amazing you were able to kind of quote unquote fake the glow effect, because I remember even as a kid, especially on the final map in the game when you're going against Piecemeal, the glow underneath the cars, it looks really good. Like for PS1 standards alone, like it looks really good. And it is a shame that we never got to see that PS2 version that would have had, like you said, the real-time lighting effects. So yeah, that would have been really cool to see.
I appreciate you liking that effect. It didn't look great on PS1 on the actual console, but Duck Station, it looks pretty decent. And if we did get that real-time lighting effect, could you imagine? I would have stuck lighting effects on missiles and explosions, so you would get these like flashes of light or glowing contrails as they kind of zip through the level behind a missile. It would have looked really nice.
Oh, for sure. And that's kind of where, like how Small Black looks like with all their missiles, really lighting up the environments with how dark and dreary the atmosphere is. And I'm sure you got to mess a lot with that with the online, right?
Yeah, we wanted to do the same with that. Our team actually changed quite a bit of Twisted Metal Black Online from the original version. I would consider it to be very separate from the single-player version. I don't know. Maybe this is another interview for the future if you want to tease your audience here with that.
I would definitely be down for that, and I think they would as well. Alrighty, so now moving on to number 4. What's the greatest obstacle that you've ever faced while creating a game from start to finish?
Ooh, that's a good question. Every game I've worked on has had its challenges, from small team sizes to year-long crunches, or even publisher cancellations. That being said, Small Brawl had the most obstacles I've ever encountered during development. I think we've mentioned before, like the game was going to be PS2, then it got downgraded to PS1 during development. That required us to redo all the assets for PS1 standards, including keeping in mind of poly counts and small texture sizes that were pretty aggressive at the time. And since we were going to, the second part of that is since we were going to use Black's engine for this version, we were told we couldn't use that anymore because, for obvious reasons, Black's engine wasn't going to work on PS1. So we're like, oh no, what are we going to do here? I kind of made a stink to Sony about it. So did my boss at Incog at the time. We were told we could then use the Twisted Metal 2 engine, which kind of made my fears lessen a little bit around the situation.
Sure.
But after a couple of weeks of looking for it, no one could find the Twisted Metal 2 engine. Sony couldn't find it, Incog couldn't find it, and then that required us to write the engine during the development cycle while we were making the game at the same time. So they brought in a bunch of old single-track guys who I think had the engine code memorized, and they banged that thing out in an impressive amount of time while we were literally building the game. This is like... it's like building a train while you're building the track as it's barreling down that track. Like this is what you just don't do in game development. Period. It's an absolute recipe for disaster. And then the Small Brawl team, the last hurdle we had to kind of deal with is the Small Brawl team was a separate entity from the main group that made Black. They finished Black. They wanted a break. They wanted to go work on things like Downhill Domination and War of the Monsters. So we, like me and Mike B, basically had to put a team together and spin up a new studio outside of Incog and train up these people on PS1 art techniques while we're also doing development. So it was quite a few hurdles that in most circumstances, I think would have gotten the game canceled outright, but we drug it across the finish line.
Right.
Usually it's like, oh, we got crunch, or oh, someone quits mid-development, or the engine can't handle this. Like, those are the usual setbacks. This was a perfect storm of setbacks.
Yeah, just above and beyond, just thing after thing after thing, making it more difficult. And like you say at the end, like, it is amazing. It is like hearing all this and learning about all this. It's amazing the game wasn't canceled. Like you guys were able to push through and complete it. That's astonishing.
Yeah, I'm quite proud of that. Like, given all these obstacles, which would usually spell disaster, we managed to get it out the door, and I'm very, very proud of that fact, and very proud of the team that was involved in doing it. Like, it was definitely trial by fire.
For sure. And yeah, I mean, pat yourself on the back too for getting through that, and honestly making an amazing game on top of that. So that's still played and loved to this day by so many people. So heck yeah.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate
that. Of course. And now moving on to number 5. This one was a little tricky to word, so hopefully I made it understandable. In your opinion, what is more difficult, coming up with original characters and levels, or taking already established characters and levels and implementing them into your own vision?
Ooh, that's a good question. Both have challenges. An established game has a foundation to start from for characters, mechanics, stories, and world building, but requires you to stay within that foundation. For example, like if you're given Twisted Metal, you can't suddenly put unicorns as the vehicles in there. Like, that's not going to fly. That is not that universe. So there are big constraints. Even a game like Small Brawl, which had the foundation of Twisted Metal, we went outside with the visuals and story, and as expected, it got a lot of backlash. So if you have an established game, there are, I want to say, rules in which you have to stay in for the audience to really enjoy that particular title. On the other hand, coming up with original games and characters allows for a lot of creativity. And no one will say, hey, that's not, this fictional character. or that's not the way this universe works because this is the first time they've ever seen it. You're laying down that foundation, that groundwork, the rules, all that type of stuff.
Right.
But original games can go off the rails without any boundaries. Like when the sky's the limit, you try to fit the whole sky and outer space in there at the same time, and it easily leads to feature creep. So, you know, my preference, going back to your question, is like, my preference is a hybrid between the two. An original title based on an existing genre, so that it can be creative, but also has a foundation to work from.
Sure.
So like an example would be like, Vigilante 8 was kind of that. It was the first Vigilante 8 in the series that I worked on, but we had and we could do a lot of creative stuff, but we had the foundation of auto combat. Like we knew we had cars, machine guns, weapons, special weapons. These were the boundaries we needed to stay in without, completely going off the rails. So it kind of grounded it, but allow us to be very creative with things like our weird specials or combos or things like that.
Sure. Yeah, that makes the most sense to me, and it is cool that you got to be a little bit more open with your creativity in Vigilante 8. And honestly, even with Small Brawl, I felt like you guys probably were given the most creativity creativity like freedom for that game, because it had to be such a different atmosphere compared to all the others in the series.
That's a good observation. Yeah, because it was aged. You hit it right on the nail on the head there. Because it was different ages and RC cars, we could do a lot more. We could explore a lot more, do a lot more interesting things. But as we all know, based on history, pushing some of those boundaries were not well received once they started pushing outside the box.
Right.
It's good to see that people see the creativity and what it was now, like 20 years later.
Yeah, I think it's just, a lot of people had to grow up and understand, as a kid, you're so used to one thing, and then when it changes, a lot of people just don't deal with change very well. So it is sad that, unrightfully so, Small Brawl got a lot of heat when it first came out, but just like you, I'm very glad that a lot of people are coming out and saying, hey, this game was actually pretty damn good.
Yeah, I mean, and you're completely right about, like, if they're used to this being Twisted Metal and then they see Small Brawl, they're going to be like, what the hell, this is awful. But kids coming in, and this is their first Twisted Metal, are more open-minded, and they see the fun in that without having the expectations of the other Twisted Metals, kind of clouding their opinion of it.
Right, yeah, 100%. And moving on to the sixth question here. Who is your favorite Twisted Metal character in Small Brawl? And also, after that, what is your favorite in the entire series?
Oh, let's see. My favorite character in Small Brawl is I love Sweet Tooth's character design, but I like Darkseid's car design. Out of the entire series, I want to say it's probably a good toss-up between Darkseid and Slam. I like the heavy characters that can push characters around, that don't require a tremendous amount of accuracy as far as weapons and aiming and stuff goes. I like to jump in there and just hit things around.
For sure. And it's awesome to hear, like, I feel like it's really rare if you ask somebody who's a fan of Twisted Metal, you say, what's your favorite character? It's rare when you don't hear either Sweet Tooth or like Axel. Those are like the two I think I hear the most. And I think it's just because they're the most iconic. They look, I guess, the most unique in a way. Of course, Axel as well between the two wheels. But I love that you brought up Darkseid. I think Darkseid is really underrated. And like you, I think it's a lot of fun playing a bigger vehicle that can just kind of plow through their enemies. And of course, Mr. Slam. I mean, I think you've probably heard this before. I truly believe Mr. Slam is like the poster child for Small Brawl. I think they have the best ending. I feel the car feels the best to play as. And kind of when you were talking about earlier about that aha moment of switching up the special weapon to not only do damage if you were to grab somebody, but if you do miss them, you still have that chance of doing shockwave damage, which was just like a stroke of genius. So yeah, I'd say Mr. Slam would probably be my favorite as well.
I'm not going to fight that opinion.
Awesome.
Him just being able to grab people move them around strategically in the environment, use them on specials, or just throw them away so that you have less cars to deal with. It makes them a good utility car on top of that.
Oh, 100%. Especially if you're like on the treetop level, you just throw them off and easy kills.
Yeah. He takes maximum advantage of all the environmental hazards.
Very true. And in Small Brawl, there's a ton of them. Where I feel in a lot of the other TMs, there is environmental hazards 100%, but it just, for me personally, I just don't think there's as many that I can remember off the top of my head. Versus in Small Brawl, I feel like almost every map had at least one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something I wanted to make a standard throughout that game. Basically, we had a lot of them in V8, and I want to kind of up that a little bit. Also, like, we tried out the environmental power up in that because it was always a pain to lure a car to a hazard, set them up, trigger it, and hope it hit. And it was a bit of an experiment where it's just like, well, what if you could just carry this around with you, and if you see them in the area, then you could trigger it.
Sure.
And in some ways it was successful, in some ways not so much. Like, it was just one of those things we wanted to try to see if it was going to work better in the series.
Right. And yeah, and I'm glad it came through, and a lot of the levels you get to use that environmental little red button, which is pretty cool. So yeah, glad it all came together. Moving on to number 7 here. How do you feel knowing that there is such a positive cult following to so many of the games that you've created over the last 20 years?
This was a huge surprise. I'm very surprised and delighted at the same time. I've been avoiding social media and the internet outside of having to do stuff for work for like 15 years. Just knowing what a toxic environment it can be, or people getting addicted to social media. So, and what a time suck it is. But curiosity eventually got, the better of me, and I was wondering what the state of car combat was. So I did a search on Vigilante 8 to see if they were going to make another one. And then all of a sudden I started seeing forums on speedrunners for V8, and then same for Twisted Metal, and a lot of speedrunners playing retro games. So at that point, after taking the plunge into YouTube and Twitch, I started seeing videos on Small Brawl that were positive. Like, people like you and other YouTubers looking past the visual limitations of PS1, actually analyzing the levels and gameplay for what they were. And it surprised me, how much hate and sometimes venom the game received over the years. And I do understand, where some of this came from on the heels of Black.
Yeah.
Like, hardcore Twisted Metal fans were expecting another game like it, but they got Small Brawl instead. And this was like releasing Dark Souls 4 months later from Soft.
Right.
And they released Dark Souls Barbie Dreamtime Adventure, Kids Edition.
Yeah.
Like, there's gonna be backlash. There's no way there wasn't gonna be backlash, and I knew it at the time with Small Brawl. But now that I'm seeing it getting some love and actually the level design getting called out, I'm thrilled. Like, it is. I think that the kids who are initially exposed to it are the ones who are doing videos on it now, and they're giving honest videos on it based on the pure game experience and not the fact that it followed Black so closely.
Right. And funny enough is I actually played the first Twisted Metal. It was the first one I ever got as a kid. I think it was around Christmas of 1996, 97. I was very young. But I remember a year later I got TM2, and then the year after that I got Black. Or no, sorry, not Black, because that didn't come out yet. I think it was TM3 and 4 at the same time, or roughly around the same time, so it was a couple years after that. But then when Black came out, I remember I went to the store, I got it immediately. My dad got it for me because my parents didn't understand what ratings were. And they just like, he likes Twisted Metal, let's get it for him. And that game scared me to no end. Couldn't even watch the endings. And I remember loving the gameplay. And then it was maybe a year later when Small Brawl came out, and I didn't know it was even coming out. I didn't know there was another Twisted Metal coming out until I went to my neighbor's house, my best friend. And his dad got him Small Brawl because they were way more strict on the ESRB ratings, and they didn't want him to play Black. They didn't want him to play the other ones. But they saw this other one that looked, the cover looks more kid-friendly. And even though it is teen-rated, obviously it was meant to be more towards children. And so he got that for him for his birthday. and he invited me over, and ironically, he hated it. I remember specifically he did not like it. He just didn't enjoy it. I don't remember his reasonings for it, but he gave me it. It was like, you're a fan of Twist Metal, you can have it. So I went home that day, and I played it all the way through, and I think I beat it at least with 2 different people. And that actually became one of my most played games. I think I played Small Brawl more than any of the other ones, even Black for a while, until I was older, and then I came back to Black and really appreciated that one for, its more gory take and stuff. But yeah, coming back to it to this day as an adult now, looking back at it, and now I look at it as, I enjoyed it as a kid, but I think the reason I enjoyed it so much is because I gave it a chance in the sense of the level design and the characters, and the actual gameplay is really solid, and they did a lot of great things in it that you don't see in the other games. So where I can look back at maybe TM1, TM2, and of course 3 and 4, and look at their faults and say, yeah, I dealt with them as a kid, but as an adult, they're not as fun as they were. But Small Brawl, I can still come back to it today and say this is still a lot of fun.
Well, we did our job then. One of the reasons Sony gave us for down-resing from PS2 to PS1 was not only to not compete with Black, because everybody was going to buy Black, and then 4 months later, another one comes out on the same console. No one was going to buy the second one. And then they did some research, and they said, well, everybody who's playing Black is probably handing down their PS1s to their younger siblings. So let's make a Twisted Metal that is geared for the younger siblings.
Sure.
For PS1, so that we can capture that audience. Plus, auto combat is starting to kind of die off, so we need to get the next group of auto combat diehards up and going.
Right.
So it sucked you in. We got you, man.
It definitely did, and it stuck with me all these years. So yeah, can't thank you guys enough for your amazing work on these games. So moving on to number 8 here. I know it's probably impossible to choose between the games you have created, but as a gamer, putting away your creator sense, are you more of a Vigilante 8 fan or a Twisted Metal fan overall, and why?
Oh man. I'm the only game designer who's actually worked on both the Twisted Metal series and the Vigilante 8 series.
Right.
You're essentially asking me which is my favorite kid.
Yes.
That is a loaded question, man.
It is.
Each is my favorite for different reasons. The V8 combat system was more in depth, allowing players to discover and create their own devastating combos and countermeasures. Plus, we had a lot of great environmental stuff. Everything in the environment, the cars, even the terrain was destructible to some extent.
Right.
But it was less skillful with the fire and forget weapons and the wonky physics that fought against the player at critical moments. And that always drove me a little crazy. Whereas Twisted Metal was more skillful and action-packed, but the cars drove like cinder blocks glued to the ground.
It's true.
There was not much environmental interaction. The AI cheated. They were dirty cheaters. I will say, with the exception of Small Brawl, I generally make my AI play by the same rules as the player. Just like in V8, just like in Small Brawl. And the limited weapon synergy made the combat in the Twisted Metal series feel flat to me. In V8, you could get 3 or 4 weapons in the air at once and kind of build a combo where it's just like, I fire, I wait. I fire, I wait. So it's funny because Twisted Metal feels faster paced to me, but the rate at which you can unload or get weapons in the air felt slower to me.
For sure.
So thinking about it, even though the fact that Vigilante 8 helped create one of my favorite music bands, the Gorillas, that wins brownie points with me, but then also Twisted Metal just made a TV series, so
that's true.
It's kind of looking like a tie to me, to be honest. If I really wanted to go into, really want to split hairs on this, I would probably say Twisted Metal Small Brawl is probably one of my favorite projects. It was dicey and rough, but the amount of creativity I got to dump into that, I really enjoyed that quite a bit. With V8, the first V8 being a very, very close second.
For sure. But great answer, honestly. And I didn't expect you to just straight up be like, yeah, I like this one more. So that's a great answer. And even talking about like the television show for Twisted Metal, It looks like they're definitely, catering it towards kind of an everybody audience. I don't think they're catering it towards diehard Twist Metal fans, and I think that's fine. I think that's probably the better route they would have gone anyway. But I honestly could at some point as well see possibly a Vigilante 8 series pop up. I think that would be really cool, because I always felt Vigilante 8, those two games, they felt more like they had an actual, story arc to them with their characters. More were like Twist Metal for me, every game is so uniquely different in their lore that it becomes very convoluted and very random almost. I don't know if that's really the best word for it, but so I feel like making a TV show based off all the games, if they tried to be as homage to the games as possible, it'd be almost impossible, right? Because they'd have to choose one of the games. But
yeah. I mean, I get what you're saying. Like the Twist Metal series, every character felt like it had just kind of a weird one-off.
Yeah.
That was almost separate from each other. The only common tie was Calypso, where V8, and you credit Peter with this one, is every character's story kind of fed into the other, and they would encounter the other character during their storyline, and that even continued on in the second offense.
Right.
Even though it was wacky and goofy, there was a very consistent thread weaving throughout all the characters all the way to the end of the series.
For sure. And that's why I could easily see that being, if not a TV show, I would love to see it made into a movie sometime. I think that'd be really cool. I know you would love that as well. So it's just one of those things, like, I'm glad car combat is kind of coming back into the eye of even new fans all these years later. So hopefully, cross our fingers, we can get some new games as well.
Yeah, that would be great. New games by the right people.
Yes, that's a very good point to make.
I would be scared if the next Twisted Metal came out tied to the series and it was just awful. That would not help at all.
Oh, for sure. And I'm glad that one of my questions coming up soon actually involves that. But that being said, moving on to number 9, what was the hardest decision of cut content for you from any of your previous games? It doesn't have to be Small Brawl.
Right. Well, I mean, cuts happen naturally in all games due to scope feedback from players, things like that. I can think of 2 that were more changes in directions than actual cuts. As far as cuts go, a lot of my specials in both Vigilante 8 and Small Brawl got cut back significantly due to time or limitations in programming. But Star Wars Demolition was a kind of not a sequel, but took a lot from Vigilante 8 Second Offense, the combo system, destruction, different type of whammy system, things like that. The owner of Luxaflux at the time didn't like the combo system from 1 and 2 because it was too hard for him to do. So when we landed the license with Lucasfilm to do Star Wars Demolition, he's like, I don't like this system. Please come up with something new in like a week.
Oh my
I was
God.
like, oh man. He might have given me a little more than a week, but it took me about a week to land on something. And I created the original combo system and the whammies, and I was really proud of them, and they were so much fun to do. But, your boss tells you to do something, you're going to do it. So
Yeah.
I came up with a system that uses a charge-up system instead. So you would hold down the button, charge the weapon up to 1 of 4 different levels where they would each do something different. That system ultimately went on to exist in V8 Arcade, where they put in both the combo system and the charge-up system. But I still prefer the combo system for that game. And I remember another kind of funny /cut/ change in direction for the True Crime series, True Crime 2 Streets of New York, where the original character from 1 was Nick Kang, and he was moving to New York to become a police sergeant there. And halfway through development of that game, Activision did a focus test, came back and said, no, we have to have a character of a different ethnicity for New York. We want the, Marcus to be in there. Make it happen.
Oh.
Now, normally that wouldn't be a big deal because you'd have to just change a character or maybe some VO lines and things like that. But Luxo had already done a bunch of the cinematics. So the team had to go back and crunch and redo all the cinematics with the new character, redo a bunch of VOs in kind of the New York slang, which Nick didn't have. it created a lot of crunch for us. The funny thing is, in the end, when we got it all done and out the door, somebody forgot a scene where Nick is looking at a picture of his family and talking to the police chief. And in the final version, you see Marcus, who is an African American police officer, looking at a picture of an Asian American family talking about his family.
That's in the final game?
It's in the final game.
Oh my god, that's awesome. That's a funny Easter egg that I'm pretty sure probably somebody picked up on it. They're like, what the heck? Why would that be there? But most people, it would just go over their head. You know, they wouldn't probably have noticed it.
Yeah, unless you're paying close attention to know lore. It's just, we were crunching, somebody
Yeah.
missed it, we were tired, and it slipped in there. But that was another one of kind of those big cuts, but for a character.
For sure. And it makes you wonder, you were saying that you guys already had some of the full motion videos done with the original character. I wonder, have they ever released those ones with the original character, or were they deleted, lost to the sands of time?
You know, this is always a good question when it comes to stuff cut in game design. I guarantee someone has saved it. It's always a producer over at Activision or someone on the team saves their work for their portfolio, and then 15-20 years it just leaks on the internet.
Yeah, they're just like, you know what, I'm proud of this, let other people see it. That would be really cool.
Yeah, there's some pretty stringent NDAs that we sign, non-disclosure agreements, that
Yeah.
if you show off work, you can get your butt sued by Sony, Activision, things like that. So everybody's usually very careful.
Yeah, and that's definitely understandable. And you were saying that sometimes producers are the ones who will take stuff like that home. I wonder, would a producer have the legality to leak that stuff later on?
No.
Oh, okay.
Anybody who signs the NDA can't leak that stuff. That would have to come from high up. They'd have to waive that in some way.
I gotcha. Well, who knows? Maybe, hopefully one day that'll be waived. I would love to see those original FMVs.
Yeah, me too. They're lost to time. Yeah, it's funny because every time you see something leak on one of my games, I'm pretty sure I know who the person is, but they always stay anonymous so they can't be tracked down.
That's a good way to do it, honestly. I'd probably do the same thing. Even if I knew 100% I was like legally able to do it, I still would do it anonymously just to make sure.
Yeah, that's what you would have to do.
Alrighty, let's see. Number 10. What got you into wanting to start streaming and creating content on your past games for Twitch and YouTube?
This is a twofold answer. I started working at a streaming company that was making games for people who streamed on Twitch. And one of their requirements for taking the job was to start streaming. We unfortunately got into crunch, and I didn't start streaming for quite a while there. But I would say about 2 or 3 months ago, the bug bit me, especially once I started getting on the YouTube and Twitch and seeing all my games played by other people. And after seeing them playing these games, I said, hey, I could do this, and me playing my old games would actually be a good way to start streaming, because I know things about my games and behind-the-scenes stories, and showing off tips and tricks that a lot of people didn't know about the games itself. And it would be good to kind of capture all this knowledge before I get too old and start forgetting everything. And then it's just lost to the times.
That's a very good point. I mean, like we kind of made a joke at the beginning, 20 years, it's nothing to scoff at. It's a long period of time. So if you can, do it now, that's great. And I think it's also really cool to know that you looking at the community or finding out about your games, having a community in 2023, and seeing that there's a positive feedback, that kind of pushed you to want to get into it yourself and start streaming and talking about these old projects of yours. So that makes me as a content creator feel really like validated. It makes me feel like really good to know that somebody that I look up to and I appreciate for their hard work, that I can have a good time with, that pushed them to want to come back and relive the good old days, so to speak.
Yeah, and it's a lot of fun streaming, and obviously the stuff that I make, people can feel free to, take what they want from it and use it for their own videos. Obviously with my permission, but like if I'm giving kid tidbits out on YouTube and Twitch, like, here you go. Here's a new fact that you can insert into a video that you are making yourself, to pad out your content also.
Right. I know for a fact there's been so many people in the Discord that have just been mind blown. They're like, "Wait, you actually worked on this game? You made that?" And, they'll ask you questions and you're just right to it like, "Yeah, we did this. This is what we did. That's how it was." And I guess growing up, you kind of when I'm like watching a movie or playing a game that I'm really into, I just think of I put the people that made that stuff on the highest of like pedestals. So when I got to talk to you and I was like, oh, he's a down to earth guy. He's a regular dude, and he just loves what he does. He likes talking about what he did, and that to me was just such a cool experience. And I think a lot of the people can say the same thing, being able to just ask you questions and kind of shoot, lack of a better word, shoot the shit, and you're chill with that. It's a really cool way to be, and I think that also will help you get really far with your content, their streams, YouTube, you name it, because it's all about just being personable and being able to connect with your audience.
I mean, going back to your point of like, yeah, I came onto the Discord and I'm bragging about, working on this game or this like 20 years ago, with the amount of hate that Small Brawl got, it was like, even from Sony, like, it was just like, none of us would admit that we worked on Small Brawl. But now that I'm seeing all these positive videos coming out, I'm like, yeah, I totally worked on that, and this is what I did, and this is how this works.
Of course. I would do the same thing. Because, yeah, you honestly, like, the fact that you guys had to go through that, that fire of hate for so long, you deserve to have some praise nowadays. Moving on to number 11. If Sony asked you to come back and create a new Twisted Metal, would you do it? Why or why not?
Yes. The answer is a resounding yes. I'd even take a crack at another Small Brawl version as long as I had a team ready to go.
Heck yeah.
An engine and a full development cycle. As for why, I want to make another auto combat or two before I retire using what I've learned over the years and possibly implement a bunch of the designs that I've kept over the years that will push the genre quite a bit, that I think people would really enjoy. I also really enjoy auto combat. I would also make another Vigilante 8. Sony Activision, soon to be Microsoft. I can make you another one if you want. I have a team I could spin up real quick on the cheap. Wink.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, see it. I mean, just knowing people, being able to say that, like put that on a resume. Hey, I have, I've done this before. I have the experience, and I also know people. We can get together right now. From my side, it's like if I was Sony, I mean, that's a gold mine right there. It's like, okay, and of course they could look at this resurgence of this huge community coming back together and saying these games are great. I mean, that's just a win-win. But I don't know. I hope that one day we do get another Twisted Metal. I would love to see another Vigilante 8 as well. And I think with not even if the show doesn't do well, I just think the fact that they were able to make a TV show with Twisted Metal in the name, I think with the resurgence of these new medias, I guess, with these game titles, it'll bring more love to the series, and I think more people will start looking it up, kind of like what you did, and they'll start finding these content creators, and hopefully that will lead to maybe some mouths talking and Sony like, hey, maybe we should look at maybe putting out a new game.
That would be the hope. I mean, Mario Brothers is the one that really kind of showed that video game franchises can be the next source of movies and TV, for the entertainment industry, now that superhero movies are kind of getting oversaturated and played out.
Yes.
So they need to find that next wave to ride.
Right.
A good game to make actually might be Vigilante 8 versus Twisted Metal. That would be a fun one to do.
That would be super cool, and if they ever have the opportunity out there, I would love for you to get that. Moving on to number 12 here. Are you excited for the Twisted Metal TV show? Overall impressions of the teaser trailer, and things or characters that you hope to personally see in the show.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm excited for what the show could do for the community, creating a buzz around a semi-forgotten genre, and possibly bringing in new people. Also, publisher interest back into auto combat. The teaser has some good stuff and some really bad stuff. I like the Sweet Tooth. The roadkill part was not so great. Same with the lack of weapons on cars. Some of the effects I saw, which seemed cheap. It also seemed like a cheap out of not having to spend money on explosions and weapon effects and things like that. You know, the fact that he's loading a shotgun instead of missiles popping out of the hood of his car is kind of a red flag to me. But I'm going to hold my judgment until I see the final release, as I know pre-production visuals and sound effects plus music can change before then.
Sure.
But damn, that dance Roadkill was doing and the music choice just killed the Twisted Metal vibe for me.
Yes, same.
It's like, what are they doing? And I get it. Like, a lot of people say, it's the teaser trailer. So much is going to change before then. But this is the trailer. You're supposed to be putting your best foot forward, and it's already turned off a lot of people with just those two choices.
Yeah, and I mean, they say that, oh, it's going to change a lot. The show, I think, comes out next month, right? I think it's the end of next month. The whole show gets released.
That sounds about right to me, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't think there's going to be much changes. You never know. I guess they could go back in there real quick and maybe do some re-edits, I suppose. But I'm right with you on that, too, with the character, with Roadkill. I think the actor, I always forget his name. I know it's Mackie, something Mackie. He's a really good actor. I'm excited to see his portrayal of John Doe. Like you, I think Sweet Tooth looked amazing. I'm excited to see Will Arnett being the voice of him. But yeah, it's just, I would have liked to also have seen some shots of maybe some practical effects of the vehicles, showing, like you said, maybe a missile coming out of the front of the car or from the side of the car, like in Twisted Metal Black, when they implemented, when you actually switch weapons, you can see it come out of the car before you shoot it, which is really cool. So it would have been nice to see more of a practical take on that. I get it, the budget would have been way higher, and maybe they didn't get much of a budget, especially that it's launching on, I think it's Peacock, which isn't the most successful or, you know, the biggest streaming site right now. But who knows? You know, maybe it'll change by the time it comes out. Maybe they'll actually get some, hopefully, Rob Zombie music in there. That'd be great. And who knows? Maybe they'll be successful and they'll get a second season and they can put everything that we'd want in that one. Who knows?
Yeah, even getting better music in there would help that trailer quite a bit.
For sure.
Like even the machine gun, like, not to make a bad joke, but the machine guns that I saw in that teaser trailer look like Small Brawl machine guns.
Like little PNG pictures going back and forth.
It was just like, oh man. And even the environment that he was driving through didn't look that interesting as far as like it was just a road through some trees as opposed to like middle of a city with people fleeing for their lives. You know, all the Twisted Metals had like pedestrians that are just running for their lives and everything, and this just is he's out in the middle of the woods, he's driving along, there's no one near him, and he's emptying his machine guns into the distance. It's like, why are you even firing your shitty looking machine guns at nothing? Like, none of this makes sense. I'm so disappointed with what I'm seeing.
Right, that's such a good way to look at it.
It's like, at least Sweet Tooth could add something to this. Like, I have high hopes for what I've seen about with that, and that car design was kind of cool too. I dig it.
Yeah, that. Right. And in that small scene with Sweet Tooth 2, it did look like there was a city behind him. So hopefully we will get, you know, a decrepit city backdrop, so to speak, for some of the episodes. But yeah, I agree. I wasn't too fond of that whole skybox scene, I suppose, looking down on his car driving through. It looked really meh, and they didn't show us really anything. But there was an edit I saw a couple days ago. Somebody actually edited in, I think it was Dracula by Rob Zombie, like in place of the song they chose, and it just fit perfect. At least, like, you know, better than the other one. The dance is still a little goofy, but at least it fit a lot better.
Yeah, the dance just didn't work. It just didn't work. That's all I'm gonna say about it anymore.
Definitely fair. Moving on to number 13 here. What's one piece of advice you can give to someone listening out there who might be interested in game design or possibly are already currently working on their first game?
Oh, good question. What is the first piece of advice? I would say study your craft. Back in my day, there wasn't a lot of game design courses or resources, but today you can find anything you want to know about game design on YouTube videos. You have websites, you got Udemy, you have various places that are an absolute wealth of information. You can go to gamedev.net and read whatever you want to know about game design there. There's in-depth articles on like boss design or level design or systems design. You can learn anything you want to learn about game design these days, as long as you put in the work to find it and read it and then truly understand it. And then part of that is just playing lots of games. Once you think you've got a good handle, play games, analyze them through the new lens you've learned from all these resources on YouTube. And that will start to make you a good game designer. I also recommend playing lots of games, board games, Dungeons and Dragons, things like that make you deal with the rules, understand them, and know how to implement them without, a computer doing it for you. Because if you really have to write the rules, massage them for your players, execute them, and make them navigate these rules, facing challenges and overcoming them, you're going to learn a lot more about game design doing that than simply playing a game that's hiding a lot of systems behind the hood for you.
For sure. That's a really cool way to look at it. I never thought about that. Definitely kind of use the old school tactics on top, like mixed with the new school in terms of, you have Google at your hands, right? And like you stated, all those different sources of information just at the tip of our fingers nowadays on our cell phone that's in our pocket. It's amazing how much information we can look at in the blink of an eye. Where back then, it was a lot of word of mouth, and you had to travel, or magazines, television. There wasn't a lot of the internet back then, so it's cool that we have so much information at our fingertips, but at the same time, you really can't beat those old school tactics, like you said, about playing board games where a computer isn't going to do everything for you, because when you're actually in the thick of it, making your own game, a lot of times the computer is going to fight back, or you got to make everything from scratch, so to speak. So you won't have that really to be a tool.
Yeah, and sometimes the computer glosses over the sticky parts that you would normally get stuck on, maybe in a board game, and you don't have to address it. But a board game you do, or in an RPG system you do. I will say one good exercise for somebody who wants to be a game designer is take a board game that already exists, play it till you know it well, change 3 rules, and then have your friends play it and see what the results are.
Ooh.
Changing even one rule can change the game dramatically. But, if you go in and change 3, especially 3 rules that you may feel don't work very well in the game, you'll start to see how systems work within that game, real time with your friends, where you would never see, very easily on, a console game at that point. And then that's where you start to get an understanding of how to build and change systems as far as game design goes.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's another great tidbit of information. Take a board game, take some of the rules, swap them out for something of your own kind, your own imagination, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, go back to the drawing board. Kind of keep doing that, and that's kind of simplistic way of looking at the grand scheme of game design, right?
Yeah. This is I teach college and game design occasionally, and this is actually one of the exercises I do with them.
Oh, cool.
That or add rules to the game. Add one at a time until the game breaks, and then you understand when you push things to their limits.
For sure. That's awesome. All right, number 14, getting to the wire here. If you could have had the opportunity to work on any game in history, what game would it have been and why?
Let me think. The original Spyro trilogy would have been great.
Ooh, great pick.
Yeah, I would have been able to work some friends on that. I would have loved it on Call of Duty. Fortnite would have been great.
Oh, yeah.
Hogwarts Legacy, the recent one, was really good, and I had a bunch of buddies on that. But I want to say the Titanfall series.
Oh, great choice.
And the reason I say that is it is vehicular combat.
It is.
The robots walk instead of driving, but it's the same motion. You get that extra layer of in and out of vehicles where you could abandon vehicles and get back in them. We actually had an idea for a Twisted Metal world that did that type of thing, where you could abandon vehicles, run to a new one, and get in it. And it kind of had that. Plus, I could, I would say my skill set leans heavily into level design and weapon design and boss design and adaptive AI, and all of that would actually be brought to bear in a vehicular or a Titanfall series game. So I really love that series. I thought they did an amazing job with it.
They really did, and it's really sad how glossed over that series got when Apex Legends came out. Because don't get me wrong, Apex Legends is great, but I think everybody should go back and experience Titanfall. If not Titanfall 2, I think that one was even better. Yeah, they knocked it out of the park with that game. Even if you don't play the multiplayer, 'cause I don't even know if the multiplayer is still around anymore, sadly. But the single player alone, it's short, but God, it's sweet. It's very, very fun.
Yeah, it is. It is one of those magical games, being able to run around in a mech, having your buddy jump on your shoulder while you're driving that mech, and they're giving you a little bit of cover. The map design in it is great. The AI in it is great. The different modes are fantastic. That is, Respawn really cut their teeth on that. I get it. I know why they've kind of abandoned the series to go move on to the Star Wars franchise, because obviously when the Star Wars franchise comes knocking, you don't say no. But I would love it if they brought that back, and honestly, that would be a dream project to work on, I think.
For sure. Well, hey, if anybody at Respawn's listening, you know who to call. All right. On to the 15th and final question. Do you have any new projects that you're currently working on? Any new games, content creation ideas, future stream ideas that you can talk about or would like to share details for?
Yeah, I mean, for right now, my main project is going into content creation, working on YouTube and Twitch and trying to get that going, figuring out how I'm going to break down my content from like Vigilante 8 and Small Brawl, individual character playthroughs with some behind the scenes stuff, and then going over some designs that didn't make it into the game. Things like that. I might eventually move over into other areas where maybe I play Mario Kart with some people and we can analyze it, or maybe I do a level design online kind of thing, maybe once a week, where everybody can watch and see the tools of the trade and how things are created in games and things like that. Just
that'd be super cool.
Just to do a stream of consciousness for now. And then I'll probably work on a couple small projects on the side while I'm doing that. That I'll probably reveal on stream. I may just even build a 2D side-scrolling game on stream and just let people see that creation also.
Oh, heck yeah. Yeah, I think, that's one of the biggest draws, I think, to not only your content, of course, but like any old developer that worked on a series that's beloved by people, coming back to it, and now they're making content themselves. I think just that, like, curiosity of wanting to know, how did that happen? Where did this come from? It's almost endless. Like, obviously there is a limit to how much stuff you can tell people from, every member you could think of. But even if you do get to that limit, like you're saying right now, there's still so much more you can teach to people through streaming, through YouTube, whatever it is, on new games that you could be working on or new things like that. And I think that's really cool, and it's very valuable as well, not only just for a content, the entertainment value, I should say, for the viewer, but I think also just in terms of teaching them that they can use that knowledge, and if one day they want to go into game creation, something like that, they can use that and do that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always happy to share, always happy to talk to people on Discord. So, and then it should be fun putting out some of this content. It's a new thing I haven't done before, but so far I'm enjoying it quite a bit.
Of course, heck yeah. And by the way, in case I didn't already say this at the beginning of the interview, if you can check out his socials in the description below, of a link to both his YouTube and his Twitch. It's Goodrich Gaming. Definitely go give him a follow and a subscription. And I hope to see you there. And I just want to say thank you so much, Dave, for being here and for letting me do this interview. It's honestly been a super huge honor, and it's been a lot of fun.
Okay, I have answered your questions. According to the Pact of Auto Combat, you must release me. Release me from the YouTubes.
Alrighty, well, we gotta let Dave go, but thank you again, sir, for being here and for answering all my questions today. It's been invaluable.
No problem, man. It's been fun.
Thank you guys so much for making it to the end of the video. Before we head out, I want to give a huge special thank you to our channel members, Wade Lady, Saint Jimmy 528, Thraster the Black Stallion, and Brandon McKagan. I hope I said you guys' names right. If I do butcher them, let me know in the comment section below this video, and I will be sure to fix that for next time. But yes, these are amazing people who are wanting to support the channel and the content here. And if you want to do the same, you can click the little join button underneath every single new upload. And in becoming a channel member not only supports me and the channel, but also gives you a ton of perks in doing so, including early access to new content and being a part of exclusive polls and information that other people would not be able to access. So, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you again so much for the love and support, and we'll hopefully see you in the next one. Peace out.
But I can see where people think Vigilante was a ripoff of Twisted Metal, and really Vigilante 8 was supposed to be the console port of I-76. And the Luxo guys, before I joined, got all the cars from I-76, a lot of the weapons. They started building out environments. And as they were building stuff out, the console, the PS1 just couldn't handle big environments like I-76. So we couldn't drive for long distances and long draw distances. So they kept moving the boundaries of the arena in farther and farther until it became an arena-based game, until everything was drawing properly without crashes or slowdowns or things like that, even though we still had them during, certain moments in the game.
Sure.
So when I joined the team, I thought this was a Twisted Metal ripoff myself. And I asked the guys, and no one on the team was a gamer. None of them played Twisted Metal. And I was the only guy who played Twisted Metal. And I was like, this naturally evolved from, an open world I-76 into a kind of a Twisted Metal arena-based game simply because of the constraints of the console.
Sure.
I was the one who's just like, oh, these weapons are so basic. If we're going to compete with Twisted Metal, we need to put in combos. We need to put in a system that kind of ups things, compared to Twisted Metal with the whammy systems and totals and things like that. So I was the one, after a lot of these levels were built, the cars were in, the weapons were in, was layering on these extra systems into Vigilante 8 that made it more like Twisted Metal. But the small arenas and the beating up of cars, no one had played Twisted Metal before I came on.
That's so crazy. And yeah, you'd never, like, as an outsider looking in, immediately you're like, oh, Twisted Metal ripoff. Like, everyone at that studio knew what they were doing. But it's like, no, that's just that's just not the case. It just happened to be that way because at the time, there wasn't really a car combat game. Twisted Metal just came out. Because when did the first V8, when did that release?
It was 1999?
99. So at that time, TM1, 2, and 3 were out?
I think TM1 and 2. I remember 3 coming out roughly around the same time as us. I don't know for sure.
Okay.
You'd have to, dates are easy to find, but
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I played Twisted Metal 1 a lot with a buddy of mine before I even got into games, so I know that that was the first one been out there for a while.
Yeah. And it's cool that with like Vigilante 8, even today when you were streaming it, the maps are bigger, than a lot of the ones in Twisted Metal in general. And because of that, the limitation of the system, you use that kind of Silent Hill fog effect where you got like the fog in front of you to basically stop the pop-in, not looking as crazy. But it's cool that it lets you open up to bigger maps and more map hazards and environmental stuff that you didn't get in Twisted Metal. At least not that in the original ones. Like the first, I think number 2 brought the first environmental hazards, which was like Paris you could destroy. And I think that was it. Maybe there was like a couple other maps you could destroy some stuff, but very minimal. And where Vigilante 8, I think, just took that above and beyond with a lot of the environmental hazards and destructibility, which is really cool. And it's crazy if you could take the technology nowadays and go back and use that in the creation of those games, just like how much more could have been added to the environments, like you said, to make them way larger than life to the point where you would look at that and no one could really say that's a Twisted Metal ripoff.
Yeah, it's I mean, going back to like the bosses at the company had a policy of not playing other people's games. because they
Mm,
didn't want to copy them.
yeah,
Um, but going back to your point just a second ago, is with Vigilante Arcade, they had a more powerful system
yeah.
and they made much bigger environments, but they weren't as fun because cars were
Oh,
so spaced out. It ruined the action and the environmental setups because no one was ever near you.
right.
They were so having the smaller environments was actually a better limitation for the first two than giving us, like I said, like all that extra creativity where we can do whatever we want.
Hmm.
Sometimes we should do whatever we want because then we get giant levels with no action as opposed to very small action-packed levels, which worked much better in one and Vigilante 1 and 2 than it did in arcade.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I guess the only way to fix that with the arcade version, for instance, would be to add more opponents at once in the level. But then you run into the issue of it being too hard. The AI could get kind of wonky. It's that it was meant to be. I think it was what 5 and under in Vigilante 8.
Yeah, it was four. You were against four other opponents in one, but yeah, I mean sometimes those constraints work in our favor. I think that's why one and two were much better received
Mm-hmm.
than arcade was. Like I can drive around an arcade and barely encounter an enemy there. Like I have to seek them out.
That's wild. That's I remember that was one of the biggest issues with TM4, and I've talked about this because I'm starting my playthroughs now with that game, and I've talked about this where there is a lot of lull moments in those games because I just think they had some really amazing ideas for the level design in that game, but they were so big and expansive compared to every other Twisted Metal up until that point that now they made the levels larger, but the game's engine can't go any higher than that, so they can only have like 4 enemies in there. And when you have a
Hmm.
massive map that has a ton of teleporters and you got these different sections where you're 3 stories above somebody else, you literally will never run into an enemy unless you deliberately go out of your way to find them. And a lot of the times it makes for a lot of lull, a lot of just nothing happening.
Yeah, yeah. It's in games like this, you want to keep the action very tight. Action,
Hmm.
high paced, high stakes. If you have to run for health and weapons, you want to be chased. And in some of these bigger levels, like you can just go get them whenever you want, and there's no challenge to it.
Yeah, that's really
Okay.
cool. That's cool insight on Vigilante. I never. It's funny that, like you said, you came into there and you were like, guys, come on, you haven't played Twisted Metal? No one knows what that is.
You're gonna get killed here. Yeah, during development, after telling them about it, I used to egg our programmer on to get extra features in by saying, "Well, Twisted Metal had this, and they might be doing it better than us."
Oh gosh,
And I would go to lunch and come back, and suddenly a new feature was in, and it was working great.
that's awesome. And and it kind of what you were saying about like the boss would say, I don't want you guys playing the competitors' games because I don't want accidental or subconscious ripoffs, right? But at the same time, I feel like that could lead to you having an advantage because you have this thing to go off of and make it better than what they
Yeah,
had, right?
and it was his style. Mine was different. He
Yeah.
he was okay with us playing stuff. He himself would not play the games.
Mm,
But anytime I mentioned like I want to put in this feature, he's like, don't copy them. Don't make it like this. So that's
yeah.
actually why I looked at Mortal Kombat and Tekken and Street Fighter for the extra, whammies and combo moves and things like that
Yeah.
in the game.
Yeah, that's smart. Instead of just the simple up, up, down or up, up, right, they get in
Yeah, I was
TM.
emulating those, and then I found out later that Twisted Metal emulated those also, and I'm like, well, I still copied them anyways, apparently. I guess we
That
all look at the same source.
right. Just all brilliant minded people at the same time. That's all it is.